Namaskar. Well, the International Court of Justice has ruled in favor of India. It has stayed Kulbhushan Jadhav's death sentence. It's directed an effective review and reconsideration of his conviction and sentences. And it also has affirmed Jadhav's right to consular access. It's directed Pakistan to give him consular access. So the ICJ said that Pakistan has deprived India of the right to communicate with and have access to Kulbhushan Jadhav, to visit him in detention, to arrange for his legal representation, and thereby has breached the obligations under the Vienna Convention for Consular Relations. Well, the Ministry of External Affairs has now said that India expects Pakistan to implement the directive of the ICJ on Kulbhushan Jadhav immediately. That's the main news tonight. Here are the headlines. Victory for India at the International Court of Justice. The court rules in favor of India, upholds stay on Pak military court's death sentence for Jadhav, as well as his right to consular access, directs Pakistan to provide effective review and reconsideration of his conviction and sentences. Celebrations break out not just at The Hague but also Jadhav's village. Prime Minister Modi welcomes the verdict and says that truth and justice have prevailed, congratulates the ICJ for a verdict based on extensive study of facts, asserts his government will always work for the safety and welfare of every Indian. Pakistan forced to act on terror networks. Terror mastermind Hafiz Saeed arrested by police in Pakistan on terror financing charges, sent to an undisclosed location. NIA amendment bill gets green signal from Parliament. The bill allows NIA to probe cases of terrorism, cybercrime and human trafficking relating to Indians and Indian interests beyond India's borders. Union Home Minister Amit Shah says that the bill is crucial for India's national security, assures it won't be misused in any form. The Cabinet Committee on Economic Affairs approves 2,880 megawatt Dibang multi-purpose project in Arunachal Pradesh. The project will be the highest dam in the country. The government is to bring a bill on dam safety and go ahead for the setting up of the National Medicine Commission in place of the Medical Council of India. The government also approved 7 amendments to the insolvency law. And in Karnataka, the relief for 15 rebel MLAs. The Supreme Court says that the rebel MLAs can't be compelled to take part in the assembly proceedings, and the Speaker should consider the resignations within a period of time which he feels appropriate. The government to face the trust vote in the assembly tomorrow. The Supreme Court orders to be made available in regional Indian languages. Service inaugurated in the presence of President Ramnath Kovind. The President also inaugurates additional building complex of the Supreme Court. The Fadnavis government acts tough after the Dongri building collapse. The Chief Minister announces a decision to enact a new law to remove hurdles and complications surrounding redevelopment of dilapidated buildings. The death toll rises to 12. Search and rescue operations called off. The flood situation in Bihar and Assam improves slightly with little or no rains. And in Bihar, floods claim over 33 lives, while affecting over 25 lakh people. 700 relief camps have been set up across Assam, sheltering more than 1.5 lakh people. And in sports, India's Kidambi Srikanth and PV Sindhu win their opening matches in the Indonesia Open Badminton Championship. Srikanth beats the Japanese Kenta Nishimoto, and Sindhu overpowers the Japanese Aya Ohori. And let's begin the show by first going straight across to our correspondent Amritpal Singh. And there Amrit is standing outside the International Court of Justice at The Hague. Well, Amrit, you were there inside listening to the judgment as it was being read out. It's a huge victory for India. Almost every single prayer that India had put forward has been accepted by the court. It's upheld India's point of view. what's the mood like in the Indian camp?
Great
That is
diplomatic victory for India. For me personally, a historic moment, because I was inside that courtroom here at the Peace Palace in Hague while this important verdict was being read out. Essentially, the court has ruled, Mark, that Pakistan has breached the international treaty, which is the Vienna Convention on Consular Relations, that on various counts, on the count of not allowing consular access to Jadhav, of failing to inform him about his rights, about his legal rights while in custody, and also delay in informing India, which are a clear breach of consular relations. So that is one thing that the court ruled. The other thing that the court, by implication, said that because the Vienna Convention has been breached in this particular case, the trial of Yadav that took place in a military court in Pakistan was vitiated by not giving him adequate legal representation or consular access to India, and therefore Pakistan should reconsider and review the trial, which reconsider the judgment, the verdict of its court, which primarily means in a layman's language that Pakistan should go in for a retrial. And also it has said very importantly, both for Yadav, his family, and India, because he's an Indian national, that
Right.
Jadhav will not be executed. His execution and sentencing stand suspended till the time review of his case happens.
right. And now, what's the next process? Because well, there is going to be a retrial. So how does that one? How does one go about getting that started?
Well, what will happen is that Pakistan will have to go look back at the judgment and do a retrial. One thing that Pakistan has got away with is that India had pleaded with the court that retrial, if the court so pronounces, should happen, preferably in a civilian court. The court did not say categorically on that. It said that there should be a review and reconsideration by a method of Pakistan's choosing. So that means that they can actually try him in a military court once again if they so wish to. But they'll have to provide him consular access, they will have to inform him about his rights, they will have to give him a lawyer of his own choosing. Right. The Indian diplomatic court.
Amit, I'm going to stop you for a little moment because we are going to cross live now to a press conference being addressed by the Indian lawyer Harish Salve, who represented India in this case.
Not only did the court not get drawn into this, but displaying this passport led to the court rejecting Pakistan's argument that Jadhav's nationality was uncertain. The court said, if you say that there was a passport which you recovered, true or false, the court said if you recovered a passport which you rely on and it was issued by India, you could have had no doubt that he was in India. Pakistan ran 3 preliminary objections. I will not bore you with the details. They were legalistic. But some of them may be of interest. In the course of its exchange with India, where India repeatedly sought consular access, at one stage, based on the extracted confession, which Pakistan played over and over again in the international media, Pakistan told India that they had registered a first information report for those who in India had supported Jadhav in what they alleged was his conduct and his activities in Pakistan. The who's who of India's officialdom was named in that. And at one stage Pakistan claimed that if India were to allow that, then it would allow consular access. In the ICJ, Pakistan also ran the case that India has not cooperated in this investigation and therefore India should not be heard to complain of violation of the Vienna Convention. This argument has been rejected. I have a degree of personal satisfaction that a lot of adjectives were used by Pakistan in its submissions. Even in replying in the court, I characterized them as unfortunate, and I said it is my upbringing and India's tradition which stood in my way of replying to them in that language. Pakistan had based allegations of what we as lawyers call abuse of process, and said that was another ground why India should not be allowed the relief it seeks. That has been rejected. The court has held that Pakistan is guilty of what it, and this is what I have written down when I was hearing the judgment, the court has held that Pakistan is guilty of internationally wrongful acts of a continuing character, and it must cease those acts. I think in the language of diplomacy, which is the language of the International Court of Justice, this is trenchant indictment. Personally, as a lawyer, I am delighted that the court has upheld our argument that while construing the Vienna Convention, the ICCPR, the Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, must inform its interpretation. All this has led to the court giving us the final relief. We had ambitiously asked for annulment. The court said we can't annul, but they have said that Pakistan has to do everything to make the Vienna Convention right a living reality. They have to allow review and reconsideration. They have rejected the argument that clemency is a form of review and reconsideration. They have not accepted the argument that resort to judicial review in Pakistan courts is good enough. And that is why they have said that you must allow review and reconsideration. As I read the judgment, the critical point of review and reconsideration is that he has to be allowed consular access, he has to be allowed, and the review and reconsideration must take into account the potential prejudice caused to him, the implications of his evidence, and his right to defense. And it is only such review and reconsideration where we or our consulate will not only be allowed to meet him, discuss with him, see the papers, examine the evidence against him, but also arrange for his legal representation. And then there has to be a fair trial. Pakistan's Attorney General asserted that their constitution assures a fair trial. The court has said you must take all steps necessary. What steps you take are of your choice, respecting the sovereignty of Pakistan. But they have said this choice is not a free, unhindered choice. There is what they have used a nice phrase, they have said there's an obligation of result. And that result has to be a fair adjudication after allowing him consular access. And most tellingly, the court has said, you will take all steps necessary, including legislative measures. So Pakistan's repeated assertions that our existing laws are good enough and he can get nothing beyond has not been accepted. So I think I see this judgment with a sense of relief, a sense of gratification. And of course, they have said that till all this is done, there is no question of executing him. So I see this as something which we are very happy with, and I think it is now a good moment for us to help Jadhav get justice, ensure he has a fair trial, and since I know this is a question which all of you must be having in your mind, what if? The answer is, as in the other cases, the way the court judgment is, we can always go back to them if what they give is not a fair trial. Thank you.
I just wanted to ask you, sir, is this trial now going to carry out in the military court or does it have to be in the open court?
They have set a fair trial in accordance with the Pakistan Constitution. If it is back in the military court with the same rules where outside lawyers are not allowed, we are not allowed, access is not given, evidence is not given, it will not meet the standards. So either they will have to amend the military law, and they are laying themselves open to the challenge that that trial was not a fair trial as contemplated by the court. That's why I said I'm very gratified as a lawyer that the court has said that the ICCPR must inform the interpretation of the Vienna Convention.
So Aditi from PTI, if you could just speak a little bit about the timing aspect, because the judges were quite clear about that he should be provided consular access in a timely manner. So what would that involve?
Pakistan took 3 months to notify us. First time over, the court has said that was a breach. And I would, as reading this judgment, I think if one were to be graceful, one would write tomorrow and say, please come and meet him.
So what is the force of this judgment? Because as I understand it, it's not binding and the court can't enforce it.
What makes you say it's not binding? Yeah, I know some people are suggesting. What do you mean by a binding judgment? Look, if the Supreme Court of India tomorrow were to give a judgment and the government says, I refuse to follow it, what can the Supreme Court do? The power of all the courts, as we say in our system, the courts have neither the power of the sword nor the power of the purse. Their power is the power of public opinion. If the ICJ verdict is disobeyed, we can take measures including by way of sanctions at the United Nations level. Now, I'm sure Pakistan will not go that way, but if some country against whom a judgment is given wants to behave rogue, there are measures available. But I'm sure Pakistan will not go down that road, or at least I hope so.
So, Harika, from the BBC, how big a victory do you perceive today's judgment to be? And what next for Mr. Jadhav? And can you secure his release, do you think?
The victory is a victory of the rule of law. And whenever the rule of law wins over state tyranny, I consider it personally, perhaps being a liberal at heart, to be a big victory. What next for Jadhav? The next for Jadhav is consular access. Hopefully we might even be able to secure, maybe I am being ambitious, secure a meeting with his family which is unhindered. And Jadhav protests his innocence. I am sure if it is a fair trial with the correct legal assistance, we will secure his release. And if the trial is not fair, we can go back and knock at the door of the ICJ.
Prime Minister of India, Mr. Narendra Modi, a few hours back said that it's justice will be done with conclusion. Do you think it's a beginning?
And a big beginning at that.
Thank you.
Mr. Salvi, if Mr. Jadhav is allowed council access, will it be you continuing to present him?
Consular access is by the consulate officials. They will go, they will meet him, his defense will be arranged. I don't think I have the right to audience either as an English barrister or as an Indian senior counsel in Pakistani courts. But I'm sure there are fantastic lawyers in Pakistan who will take up his cause.
Sir, Danish Khan from Times Now. There's also this point that Pakistan was trying to make that as Jadhav was supposed to be a spy, the Vienna Convention does not apply, and I think the court has also spoken a bit about that. If you could just throw some more light on that.
Yes, Pakistan, it was one of the main arguments that a spy is not allowed consular access. We relied on the fundamental principle that the more serious the allegations, the greater the need for procedural safeguards. Secondly, at this stage, all that the court has to see are allegations of being a spy. What is in question is the process by which you will prove whether he is or is not guilty of the misdemeanors for which he is being charged. So the court came to the conclusion that on first principles, there is nothing which in the language of the Vienna Convention excludes this. Surprisingly, Pakistan referred to the Travaux Préparatoire, the underlying papers. We pointed out in those underlying papers the issue of a exclusion for espionage had been raised, and in fact the person chairing that committee said, don't reopen this issue. And the only concession they made was, the words at one stage suggested was without undue delay. Some of the countries said if you arrest somebody on allegations of spying, if within that day or within 24 hours you inform his home state, the others may go missing. So you might give us 2, 3 or 4 days to round up everybody and then give consular access, which is the elbow room available in working any international instrument. So the court looked at all this and said, therefore this argument that it is to be left out of consular access in the Vienna Convention is wrong. Pakistan also tried raising an argument which I must still confess I was not very clear about. It said that customary international law did not countenance consular access to spies. I was wondering why they are even arguing that, because we were arguing what is allowed under the Vienna Convention. And that's exactly what the court said, that we are concerned with the Vienna Convention. If customary international law didn't allow it, so be it. And nothing turns on that. So on both these grounds, we succeeded in getting the court to hold that he was entitled to full consular access rights.
As a senior lawyer now, and since you've known the Jadhav case so well, how long did you envisage being rejected, the process for him to get justice?
I won't speculate on that.
There are 2 questions. So what about Jadhav's safety inside the Pakistan regime? That's one. And the second one is, in this case, a civilian was kidnapped from Iran and taken into Pakistan, and he was gone for his body. So as a person, he was going to sue Pakistan for.
Sorry, I missed your last bit.
Is it possible for him to sue Pakistan for compensation?
Well, as far as the first part is concerned, one of the things why consular access was put in the Vienna Convention was, if you are in touch with the person in detention, you can also look after his well-being. And if he is not kept in good conditions, if he is being tortured, if he is being in any way being mishandled in the jail, you can take it up at a country-to-country level. So the very fact that you have consular access acts as a check and safeguard against any abuse in the jail. As far as his allegation that he was kidnapped is concerned, unfortunately we don't yet have an international court where one could sue countries for kidnapping.
I've got 2 questions. What will happen if he doesn't get given consular access? And also, can you explain how Pakistan can carry out an effective review and reconsideration by means of its own choosing?
The consular access has to be given. I thought the first part of your question is what happens if he is not given. Well, if he is not given, that's a violation of the order of the ICJ. We can go back to the ICJ and seek further directions if they would help. If a country brazenly defies an ICJ edict, There are other provisions, including sanctions by way of sanctions in the Security Council and other international law remedies available. That's the answer to the first part of your question. The second is, the court has made it very clear that their Attorney General said their constitution guarantees a fair trial. They expect Pakistan to do whatever it has to, including appropriate legislative measures to guarantee a fair trial. So Pakistan's conduct is under watch, and if what they do is another farcical attempt, we will, believe me, we'll be back in court.
Have you been speaking to the family? What's the family's reaction to today's?
I was told to come and speak to you before I speak to anybody else.
Was there any word today on the way Pakistan communicates with India on what it's going to do next, given it took about 20-25 days for them to report officially that they had arrested Mr. Jha?
I don't know. I mean, as we had to do, and that's why I was late by half an hour, we had to get back on our desk and sort of try and understand the judgment from what we had scribbled or what we saw on the screen, and try and understand its implications. I'm sure they will have a lot more work to do. We are watching as to what they do. They are the ones who have to now take measures. So they are the ones who will have to work out a path forward. I was told that there is some press release from Islamabad saying that they will respect the judgment of the court. I may not be using the same words which are there in the press release, something to that effect.
So thank you so much, and thank you all for coming. We have some tea and coffee served at the back, and you can join us for that. Thank you so much.
And that was a press conference being addressed in London by India's lawyer who presented India's case at the ICJ, Mr. Harish Salve, and he took a number of questions interpreting the judgment of the International Court of Justice. And to put all that into perspective, we have with us in the studio three eminent guests. We have Ms. Meera Shankar, former ambassador of India. We have Kamar Aga, a strategic affairs expert, and Dr. Vayasar Murthy is a human rights expert and from the Jindal School of International Law. We'll start with you, Ms. Meera Shankar. What are your first reactions to this judgment?
I think it's a welcome judgment. Many of the points which India had put forward before the International Court of Justice have been upheld. The jurisdiction of the ICJ in the matter has been upheld. Pakistan has been found in violation of its obligations under the Vienna Convention, which was also one of India's points, that they had not notified Kulbhushan of his rights, nor have they notified the Indian authorities till very late, almost 3 weeks later, and our requests for consular access had been denied.
Constantly denied, yes.
Constantly denied. And finally, the execution of the death penalty has been stayed,
yes,
till a final reconsideration and review and reconsideration of the case by Pakistan. While the court has not, set aside the judgment by Pakistan's military court and allowed Kulbhushan's safe passage
yes,
to India, which was India's best case
yes,
outcome.
that's right.
The second outcome that we had sought was that he be given a fair trial in a civilian court.
Right.
And there the judges have basically upheld the need for a review and reconsideration of the judgment, and a fair trial, though they have left it to Pakistan
Yes.
to decide on the appropriate mechanism for this.
Mr. Kamarada, the Pakistan constitution says that they believe in fair trial, fair justice, but this is a fresh trial, a review and reconsideration, and also a fair trial. Because as Mr. Harish Salve says, the world will be watching Pakistan, because you can't start to go back to the military court and replay everything that has happened there once before.
He's right, yes, there's no doubt, the ICJ has accepted, called for a fresh trial, but we should not expect much from Pakistan.
Okay.
Because we have seen in the past, we have never got justice from neither from the military court nor from the civilian side, civil court, both of them. So to expect from Pakistan that they will have a fair trial is difficult. Yes, but we should continue to maintain pressure on Pakistan. We should try to get him back through an exchange of prisoner or some mechanism, or through some method, because as far as civilian court is concerned, we have seen, the court is extremely or increasingly biased in favor of army, or increasingly influenced by the Jamaat-e-Islami of Pakistan.
So you're suggesting that the judicial system itself is not fair in Pakistan. Okay, let's bring in Mr. Murthy here. Dr. Murthy, from the human rights point of view, what is the next step that is required to be taken? Because Pakistan has been ordered now to at least give consular access. That's the beginning, at least, isn't it?
Yes, it is. And the consular access goes along with the legal representation and other forms of assistance. And what is important is that the ICJ has asked the Pakistan government to have an effective review and reconsideration. However, it has left the means to the Pakistan government on how it proposes to go about this review. But
it's also given directions, even in appropriate law. You should create an appropriate law.
Paragraph 146 of the ICJ judgment is a key, and in that they mention that though it is left open to the Pakistan government on the means, but it is not one without any qualification. In fact, they specifically mention that the effective quote-unquote review and reconsideration is an obligation of result which must be performed unconditionally, and they also said the Pakistan government shall move towards a change in the legislation. In fact, in the judgment, if you see, there have been references to ineffectiveness of clemency petitions and also the opaque trials under the military courts with a limited appeal. So these are all important human rights considerations, and ideally there should be a trial before a competent civil judicial tribunal, and in the interests of justice and fairness.
Ma'am and gentlemen, I'll come back to you, but let's get the viewers up to date with this story that we're going to run now. Wednesday proved to be a day of celebrations for India. The International Court of Justice ruled in favor of India in the Kulbhushan Jadhav case. It upheld the stay on the Pakistan military court's death sentence for Jadhav, and also as well as his right to consular access. Now, the court has directed Pakistan to provide effective review and reconsideration of his conviction and his sentences. More in this report.
The entire world watched on Wednesday as the International Court of Justice at The Hague delivered its verdict on the Kulbhushan Jadhav case. It was around 6:30 in the evening when the 16-judge bench began pronouncing its verdict, and it soon became clear that it was in India's favor, a huge victory for India. Not only did the ICJ reiterate the stay on the death sentence for Jadhav, it even granted India's request for consular access to the former Indian naval officer.
The court finds that Pakistan's third objection to the admissibility of India's application must be rejected. In light of the foregoing, the court concludes that the three objections to the admissibility of the application raised by Pakistan must be rejected and that India's application is admissible.
The International Court ordered that Pakistan is under an obligation to provide, by means of its own choosing, effective review and reconsideration of the conviction and sentence of Kulbhushan Jadhav so as to rectify the violation of his rights under Article 36 of the Vienna Convention.
The court has already found that Pakistan acted in breach of its obligations under Article 36 of the Vienna Convention. First, by not informing Mr. Jadhav of his rights under Article 36, paragraph 1b. Secondly, by not informing India without delay of the arrest and detention of Mr. Jadhav. And thirdly, by denying access to Mr. Jadhav by consular officers of India, contrary to their right inter alia to arrange for his legal representation.
It said that Pakistan's clemency process in the Jadhav case does not amount to an effective review. The court directed Pakistan to provide consular access to Jadhav.
Court 1 unanimously finds that it has jurisdiction on the basis of Article 1 of the optional protocol concerning the compulsory settlement of disputes to the Vienna Convention on Consular Relations of 24 April 1963 to entertain the application filed by the Republic of India on 8 May 2017. 2. By 15 votes to 1, rejects the objections by the Islamic Republic of Pakistan to the admissibility of the application of the Republic of India and finds that the application of the Republic of India is admissible.
As India celebrates ICJ's verdict, Prime Minister Modi tweeted welcoming it. He said, and I quote, "We welcome today's verdict in ICJ. Truth and justice have prevailed. Congratulations to the ICJ for a verdict based on extensive study of facts. I am sure Kulbhushan Jadhav will get justice. Our government will always work for the safety and welfare of every Indian."
इंटरनेशनल कोर्ट ने जो काउंसलर एक्सेस की बात कही है जिसका इसका फकत है।
आज अंतर्राष्ट्रीय न्यायालय से कुलभूषण जाधव के मामले में अच्छी खबर आई है। उनको काउंसलर एक्सेस भी दिया है और उनको जो फांसी की सजा लगाई थी पाकिस्तान ने उस पर रोक लगी है, रोक जारी रहेगी। तो ये भारत सरकार ने लगातार इसके बारे में जो प्रयास किए हैं, हरीश साल्वे ने जिस तरह से पक्ष रखा है, मुझे लगता है उसी का है।
इंटरनेशनल कोर्ट ऑफ जस्टिस का यह फैसला है 15 की बहुमत से और इसमें स्पष्ट तौर से कहा गया है कि इस्लामिक रिपब्लिक ऑफ पाकिस्तान ने वियना कन्वेंशन का काउंसलर एक्सेस कुलभूषण जी को नहीं दे करके उसका विरोध किया है, उसका अवमानना की है।
The case dates back to 2017 when a Pakistan Army court had sentenced Jadhav to death on charges of espionage and terror. That year in May itself, the Indian government approached the ICJ for justice. In response, a 10-judge bench of the court directed the Pakistan government to stay Jadhav's execution on the 18th of May 2017 till it delivered its verdict in the case. Pakistan had maintained that Jadhav had entered the country through Iran, while India says that he was actually abducted by Pak from Iran, where he had gone for business purposes. India continued to reiterate that Pakistan's repeated refusals to allow consular access to Jadhav was violative of the Vienna Convention of 1963. As of now, the International Court has accepted India's strong stand in the matter, and Pakistan too has to abide by the fact that it has acted against established norms. It can now be hoped that Pakistan complies with the court's verdict and grants consular access to Kulbhushan, along with a fresh trial in which justice is meted out. With Amritpal Singh at The Hague, Newsnight Desk, DD India.
And as our report says, we can now hope that Pakistan abides by the verdict. Ms. Meera Shankar, 16 times we have asked for consular access already and have been denied. So what's the next step now? How do we get this consular access armed with this verdict?
Well, I think we need to reiterate now our request for consular access and be in touch with the Pakistani authorities as to how this will be done in a manner in which the Indian officials can have access to Kulbhushan Jadhav in an environment without interference, because the Pakistanis may delay, they are still digesting the judgment, but my sense is that they will not, go against the judgment, because they are under pressure internationally. They want to show themselves as more responsible. They're under pressure from the Financial Action Task Force on terrorism. They're under pressure from other countries like the US, and their own economic situation is very grave. So I think Pakistan would probably go along with the judgment, but they would like to spin the process, or
the word undue delay, I mean, undue delay has been emphasized and clarified by the court. So they can't take undue delay in this matter.
And the other is that I agree with what one of my colleagues said. I don't know how much faith we can put in the legal system of Pakistan. Their courts have routinely, upheld impositions of martial law by military leaders whenever they have taken over under the doctrine of necessity, or other kind of very imaginative doctrines. And now you have the judge in the Nawaz Sharif case also saying that he was pressurized. So I don't know how much faith we can put in their legal or judicial system, but I think the point is that the stay on the execution and the judgment to review and reconsider means that till this process is exhausted, at least nothing precipitate is likely to be done by Pakistan. Therefore, other channels can also be activated to see what can be done to bring Kulbhushan Jadhav home.
Mr. Qamar Agha, the next thing is to try and get proper legal representation for Kulbhushan Jadhav in the Pakistani court. Now, how does one go about this? It has to be a Pakistani lawyer, isn't it? And you did mention that the legal system is not very robust. So this is another area of concern. Or can we get an Indian lawyer to represent? Is it even possible?
Send an Indian lawyer, in fact, the Pakistani.
But is it allowed?
I don't think they will allow, because they have their own system, which is similar somewhat to India. Basically, if you look at it, they will object. They will not allow any foreigner to represent or third country. And we'll see, the pressure has to be built up on Pakistan, not only India, the global pressure, which is coming on Pakistan. That is a positive sign, and we hope, there will be some change in Pakistan's behavior, and because we can always go back to ICJ if they don't listen, or if they don't implement what the ICJ has recommended to them. There are a number of ways, the government will consider all these options and go through them. But as Ambassador Meera has mentioned, the first thing would be the consular access, just to talk to him and find out the details from him and then proceed further.
Legally, Mr. Murthy, what does review and reconsideration mean? Because, some arguments, legal arguments will be put forth saying that when a case has already been tried, you can't, repeat the same arguments. But the case being put forward here is that this was a farcical trial in which Kulbhushan Jadhav had no proper representation. So, in that respect, can this entire case be restarted from scratch?
Yes, of course. The ICJ has called for effective review and reconsideration, and as a part of that, they said the continued stay on execution will be an indispensable component of this effective review and reconsideration. And the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights upholds the right to fair trial, where a person has to be told of the charges in a language that the person understands, and also he or she must have effective legal representation convention, and so these need to be provided. And
does this take us to the situation before the trial itself? Does it bring us back to, that there's I think the legal term, some restitution, something, etc. Does it take us back to that stage?
In fact,
something.
I want to analyze the significance of this judgment.
Yes.
Assuming for a moment that, if had Pakistan's position been upheld, it would have sent a very, very dangerous precedent. Imagine a person being branded as a terrorist or a spy and placed before a military court and then held guilty and executed. And this is death penalty is an irreversible phenomena, and without proper due process and without proper fair trial. So that way ICJ has set a very important legal this thing, and it has avoided a very dangerous precedent, and it's like a vindication of the rule of law at the international level. And so in fact they have interpreted both the object and purpose of the Vienna Convention on the Law of Treaties as well as the Vienna Convention on the Consular Relations, and they went into the travel prepared to us and said,
what is the extent of consular access that a country will provide or should provide under the Vienna Convention, sir?
First, they should meet up with the detainee and also provide the legal representation, medical assistance, and understand his issues and talk to him. And these are the minimum that needs to be done without any delay. And these have been clearly explained. And all governments which have signed and ratified the Vienna Convention on the Consular Relations have obligations.
Right. So, Ms. Meera Shankar, it would be, India should be looking to see what state of health Kulbhushan Jadhav is in the first place,
Sure.
Whether he has been tortured, and all these things would affect the case to some extent. Now that consular access would be granted.
Yes, I think we would have a clearer picture of the pressures that Mr. Jadhav was subjected to, and also what his, the facts are from his point of view. So I think that it's a very important, plus it would give Mr. Jadhav the reassurance that he is not alone,
Right.
that here is the government of India with him. So it would also mean to Pakistan a signal that, it's not that you and Mr. Jadhav are alone and that you can deal with him with impunity, because, Indian officials would have access to him and would know
Right.
what you have been doing and can take this into account, in the international community.
Sure. Mr. Murthy, to what extent, has isolating a person from access to anybody, whom he can talk to and trust, affect a person mentally and from the human rights point of view, Mr. Murthy?
Yes, very much. Holding somebody incommunicado detention without access to friends, relatives, or visiting rights, or has been held to be a violation of the international human rights law. You look at the judgments of the European Court of Human Rights at Strasbourg, in a range of cases, the European Court of Human Rights, as well as the Human Rights Committee, which monitors the implementation of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, has held incommunicado detention as a serious violation of the human rights law, and
Right.
so it affects a person mentally.
Kamaraga, this judgment comes at a time when the Pakistani Prime Minister will also be going to the United States, and also on a day on which Hafiz Saeed has been, once again arrested. Do these, can we add things up? Can 2 and 2 add to 4 on this case?
Yeah, we can, because today the President Trump has tweeted, and that he welcomed the ICJ judgment. Pakistan is under pressure, terrible, from all sides, you know, but not American pressure is also there. Then FATF, you know, is also pressurizing Pakistan on this money laundering thing. Besides that, you know, the India's pressure is also there because especially after the Balakot air strikes. You know. So all these things work together, you know. Plus now this judgment has also come. So we hope, you know, some sense will prevail on Pakistani military authorities, and they would realize, they would understand the importance of this judgment, because otherwise the Pakistani government's credibility is at a very low stake at the moment, you know, and the country is facing serious economic crisis as well, you know. So therefore, you know, we should continue to build pressure and try to find some ways and means, you know, to bring him back without the trial.
Ms. Shankar, this is being seen as a big diplomatic victory for India. So diplomacy has played a big role, but also legally, I mean, the case was presented by Mr. Harish Salve. To what extent, you know, can this coordinated approach between the legal fraternity and diplomats help in taking this case to its logical conclusion now?
I think it's worked well, and MEA, the Ministry of External Affairs, is to be commended, as also the legal team which pursued the case and put across India's point of view effectively. Clearly, since this is a judicial matter right now, where you know, it has to be review and reconsideration through a judicial process, whatever, you know, Pakistan chooses. It is important for this kind of coordinated effort to continue.
Right, and a final word from you, Dr. Murthy. So, you know, everything is what next, and we see now that diplomatically and legally we seem to be working very well as a team. So what next in this regard?
Accused persons have rights which are enshrined in international law, and they need to be respected. They need to be provided proper defense, particularly when a person accused of criminal charges is held in a foreign country and is pitted against a tough system. And hopefully there would be a trial, and hopefully there would be an effective and a credible trial. And now the international community is watching, and with this ICJ judgment, hope there will be justice for Kulbhushan Jadhav, and hopefully there could be a release of him. And
Ms. Meera Shankar, Mr. Kamaraga, and Dr. YSR Murthy, thank you very much for joining us here on Newsnight. And let's now, you know, get in touch once again with Amritpal Singh, our correspondent. He'll leave us with the pulse of whatever this decision has meant for India.
It was a big diplomatic victory at The Hague for India, as the International Court of Justice resoundingly ruled in India's favor. The court said in the Kulbhushan Jadhav case that a breach of the Vienna Convention on Consular Relations had indeed taken place. Remember, this was the principal submission of India when it approached this court here at the Peace Palace at Hague, saying that Pakistan had breached the Vienna Convention. The court ruled by denying consular access to India, to Yadav, and by failing to inform him of his rights, and also by failing to inform in time, or by delaying the information about his arrest to India, was a clear breach of the Vienna Convention on Consular Relations. Very importantly, the court also ruled that a review and reconsideration of the case may take place in Pakistan, which effectively means that Pakistan should retry him. What Pakistan got away was with the fact that the court was silent on which court in Pakistan should try him. India had argued that a civilian court should try Jadhav in Pakistan, but the court was silent on that. So for all practical purposes, if Pakistan wishes to do a retrial of Jadhav in light of this judgment, it can actually do it in a military court. The court interestingly said that till the time this review and reconsideration happens, the death sentence of Jadhav remains suspended. With camera person Jayashri Puri, Amritpal Singh, DD News, The Hague.
And with that, we conclude Newsnight today, our special focus on the Kulbhushan Jadhav case and the ICJ verdict. Thanks very much for watching. Namaskar.